Hey, Kat.
Hey Lisa,
Guess who we talked to?
who did we talk to today?
Carrie Eckerman.
I know her.
Yeah, I think everybody knows her. She is the masseuse that all the cyclists know in town. She's always at the driveway. So I think this episode is going to be really interesting to people because they'll be like, "Yeah, I know that lady," and now you'll really know.
But what was really cool was when she was talking about how she crews for ultra distance cycling events.
Yeah, that was unexpected. She talked a lot about physiology from the standpoint of cyclists because she works on so many cyclists, but she also talked about crewing, which I didn't know about. Recently, she went on an ultra race with Christy Tracy,
Right.
but she's done a bunch of them. So that, yeah, that part was
Very
really
cool.
cool.
Yeah. All right, check it out.
Sure. I've been a cyclist for 30 plus years, massage therapist for about 16. Uh, Crew and support bicycle racers in many different capacities, and house sitter, pet sitter, all sorts of hustling. Gotta pay the bills somehow. Yeah, I came to Austin about 7 years ago to work for Austin Massage Company, and uh, yeah, it turned out to be a surprise employment, and I have enjoyed all 7 years of it. So it's great.
Cool. So one thing I learned about you was that something that's near and dear to my heart is the driveway crit races, and I heard that you in previous years helped out with that. Could you explain what you did with the to support the racers?
Yeah, the driveway criterium race series pre-COVID had vendors, and in our under our tent, Austin Massage Company and the training room, physical therapy, we traded off weeks, being out there marketing slash helping different racers and just kind of being out there supporting the whole event, which has been fun. So in those, as soon as I was employed by Austin Massage Company, they had already been out there for about a year. And Michelle, the owner of Austin Massage Company, was like, Carrie, you want to try this? You're a cyclist. And I fell in love with it. Mostly like whether I worked on anybody or not, I still enjoyed it as like I would ride from my home. It'd be a 10-mile ride, and then I could go there. And pre COVID, there was beer and sometimes food, definitely water, and noon. And that's all I needed at 10 miles. Then sometimes I'd, take a break, ride 10 more miles, come back, refill, and then go home. So it was a nice 30 to 40-mile day on the regular every Thursday. But yeah, the races were March to the end of September. And this year we're kind of starting back up a little bit. A little change of hands, a couple of new things, but hopefully it'll continue to stay strong.
I hope next year that you can get back out there and help
How?
because it was really cool that you could do that.
Yeah, this year, what are you doing instead?
Um, well, pre COVID, my Thursdays were I actually would go to Silicon Labs and work inside that building, open to only Silicon Labs employees. I'd work there on Thursday morning, and then I'd bike out to the driveway in the evening. Since the driveway has not been around, I have seriously struggled to fill up that time. We they went virtual for a minute, and I really tried to jump on the bandwagon, but it took off way too fast, and I really couldn't keep up. I'm like, yes, maybe this is how I race the driveway, but didn't really work out for me. I really struggle. I do have my trainer here, but I am definitely an outdoor cyclist, so it's a challenge. So instead, I've just been biking. I certainly have leaned on the social cycling for sure when I miss riding with people. So
Yeah, for sure. What sort of things do you do for a racer, either before the ride or after? What sort of things can you help with?
Right. So when I was out at the driveway, I started out basically just standing around, and people are like, "How does this work?" And whenever I'm out anywhere in public, I'm available for anybody. A lot of people thought that I was just there for the racers, but like, I'd have, moms or girlfriends come up and they're like, "Can I get a little?" Like, yeah, I'm not exclusive, so will not turn down anybody. But yeah, so working out at the driveway, I would help mostly people post race. They'd come up to me, and their preconception of massage is that it's beneficial post activity, which sure it is, a certain type of massage. And then as I grew to develop relationships with different racers, I was able to help them warm up and prepare for the races. A lot of the times they are used to doing their own spinning and warming up, which is great. And I'm all for it. Sometimes they need a little bit of a kink worked out before a race. But before and after racing, my efforts are not deep and hard work because I don't want to throw them off on their success
Right.
or recovery.
Awesome. Okay. Well, one other thing that last weekend you and I were part of the Team Snacks, and Lisa were part of the Team Snacks Call of the Mile, where we rode we bike camped we rode from Austin all the way down to Martindale. So it was about 50 miles each way. And I don't know if you noticed, but when we got there, I set up my hammock and you were over nearby. And I saw you were doing some stretches. Like, could you tell me about what kind of stretches you do after a long ride personally, and what that helped? Were you targeting anything specific, or was there anything you had that you were doing targeted for that?
Sure. So I'm kind of a germaphobe and like not really interested in like I love the earth and nature and everything, but I don't like laying on it. So what you saw was me laying on the ground as much as my little towel could afford me. So I was laying on my back with my knees bent, and I was just laying them side to side. I personally have a little bit of issue with my hips becoming a little tight, which is not actually quite common. So that stretch really helps me in post activity. My muscles are warm and they're pliable. And so that's when I like to stretch. Uh, Typically, after a long ride or just riding at all, I prefer to lay down for two reasons. One, it drops the heart rate to resting heart rate as fast as possible, as fast as you can do it naturally, passively. And I'm able to lay in anatomical neutral. So typically, I'll get home from a ride and I'll lay on my belly and work on the laptop. So, for those of you who understand yoga poses, it'd be like Sphinx pose. Having those hips like straight as opposed to sitting, they're bent, right? I feel like that has really helped to prevent a lot of hip and low back issues that I have personally experienced, and that a lot of cyclists talk about having trouble. These issues can come about like post ride when your muscles are warm. You end up getting in the car and you start driving 30 minutes to an hour home. You spend 40 hours a week sitting at a desk. And then the few hours or minutes that you go to stand up and cook or something, your back hurts or like your hips in the front. Um, it's common. You're not dying. It's just your body is like, no, you sit, we sit. That's all we ever do. We don't stand up. We're not supposed to stand up. So, yeah, that's what I like to do is take advantage of those warm muscle times. And also, like, I exercise so that I can recover. Like, I love to recover so much that that's why I exercise. Like, I
Interesting.
love the hot tub. I love the recovery shakes. I love all, but it's not practical or useful unless you do the activities.
I ride
So,
so that when we go to the convenience store, I can eat whatever I want.
yes,
I just need
exactly.
calories.
So in high school, I was in soccer, and like we always stretched before practice. seems like back in the day it was always stretch then exercise, but now, you said that those racers are like, well, I need a massage after the race. So do you kind of have a general rule of thumb when it comes to the purpose of stretching or massaging before versus after?
Uh, yes. Um, I've been doing this for 16 years. I'd say more concentrated with sports and athletic massage in the last like 6, 7 years since I've been with Austin Massage Company. I've been able to work with a lot more athletes. Um, what I have found, what I've read from the classes that I've taken, everything, my favorite thing to share with clients, the body hack, is warm up the body gently. Go for 5 to 10 minute walk, and get the blood pumping. That's probably your best bet for doing the shortest amount of time stretching. Um, that you'd like, people are like, I just don't have time. I'm like, okay, well, go for a 5 to 10 minute walk and then stretch for 20 minutes. Um, and that's the body hack that I share with people. Massage, in a perfect world, massage would help you address things that you cannot yourself. So, in a perfect world, people would be doing strength training and a cardio and mobility and abs, because in my world, that does abs are not any one of those three. So beyond that, mobility work can prevent a lot of the issues that I see on my table. That's not to say every massage therapist will lose their job if everybody started doing mobility work, of course. Um, but not everybody does all that they should, of course. Like, I don't do all that I should. Um, so massage can help with performance. It can be like an active recovery, which it depends on what your goals are. If you are trying to do any sort of racing, running, cycling, swimming, whatever, um, when you have this off day, the rest day, depending on who you talk to, from what I understand, that rest day should be more of an active rest day. So, like a light walk, massage, or an easy workout that doesn't elevate the heart rate or make you sweat. Um, so, for a lot of the racing, the type of massage is very crucial. Some people are like, oh, well, you can't have massage, this close to a race or whatever. Well, you can't have deep tissue rolfing the day before your race. You're not going to function. You're just going to be sore and you're not going to be able to perform the way that you want. You can still have like what some people call the fluff and buff, like a very light Swedish, just kind of a flush before and after. It has to be very gentle and like the opposite of invasive, right? So it just depends on what type. And then that also is reflective in the relationship to the workout days during your training. So if you're like, for instance, a marathoner will have like a long day where they will run 18 miles. You don't want to get a deep tissue massage the day before or the day after or the day of. Like, that's not going to be fun for you unless you do like feeling pain for like 5 days. So, so yeah, that's the long of it. The short of it is anytime you feel the discomfort, do a stretch or a movement. And that can really help you to start that habit up again.
Do you have any advice that is very cycling specific, or things that you notice are common patterns amongst cyclists in particular?
Yes. The cycling position, most people who ride a cruiser or relaxed, more fit, they're sitting up a little more upright, so they don't have as much upper body issues as like a crit racer that you would find at the driveway, that where their shoulders are so much closer together on the front side than they are on the back side. Um, and compounded with that 40-hour work week, working at the computer, doing this, like that can really cause some issues in the upper body. Cyclists will typically have very strong quads. Um, Hip flexors is the phrase. Hip flexors is tight. Hip flexors is thrown around a lot. Um, and sometimes people will talk about experiencing sciatica. Some things I like to share with cyclists and similar streamlined athletes is that our hips are designed to do more than the front back work. So if you work on like as a cyclist, you're doing this, right? And our legs are, designed to do like kind of like an oval, like half, I don't know what kind of shape to describe it, but once you are able to get that mobility, catching on the theme of moving those legs in that way, that can help to prevent a lot of cycling specific issues like low back, side of the hip, front of the hip discomfort.
Cool. One thing we did after getting to the campsite on Saturday night was we ran and jumped in the San Marcos River, which is very cold, even in late summer, I guess, so early fall. This was. Do you think that was? It felt good to me, but do you think that jumping in cold water is beneficial? Did we hurt anything? Did we do any damage?
What we did, no, we did not do any damage. Our pace on that ride was very mellow. um, there was some muscle tear down, muscle buildup, but nothing more than, on an average bike ride. Um, Cryotherapy, I think, is what you're getting at. Cold therapy, it's controversial. It depends on who you ask, who you talk to, what you read. Um, I recently read an article that takes the point of how it lengthens recovery time and how it interrupts recovery time. So if you don't use ice, you would recover a lot faster than you would if you were to go into a cryo tank or
Hmm.
like after a hard effort, if you were to just jump in an ice bath. Um, Me personally, I came from Iowa, repping. Um, it's cold, okay? I have already had my cryotherapy for the first 20 something years of my life. I'm good. I don't need ice. I've never liked it. Whether it's good for me or not, I don't care. I don't want it. So
Okay.
if you're going to ask me if ice is good or cold therapy is good, I'm going to be like, nah, you don't need it. Look at me. Look at me. I've
Yes.
survived.
I heard on that subject. Do you listen to the Andrew Huberman
Yeah, I
podcast?
do.
Did you hear the episode where they were talking about if you cool down your palms or the soles of your feet, it makes your muscles fatigue less quickly because heat is the signal that your muscles use to determine when they're fatigued?
I did not listen to that one. Uh,
It was interesting.
yeah, well, and that, relates to that article that I read was talking about how or how ice affects the body in relation to inflammation, right? And how the body would naturally respond to inflammation is quite the opposite of how the body responds to ice. So it's it's a complicated relationship. It makes sense to me because I've been trying to understand it for years. I knew a therapist who used to tell people trade up heat and ice because it confuses the muscles, and I'm like, well, yeah, that is one way of putting it, but
Hmm.
that's it's not really confusing it. It's reversing it, stopping it, reversing it, and trying to take a different approach than what the body usually implements in response to inflammation.
So, the article you were reading that advised against ice was basically arguing that your body's natural recovery responses are more efficient. But then there's like that, maybe they're both true, that other thing where it's like, oh, well, your muscles don't fatigue as fast if they're cool, but those are almost separate. It's almost apples and oranges. I guess it's like two different ways to affect your muscles. They're kind of controlling.
I'm not going to get these words right, but cool ice constricts the blood vessels, and so it slows down cardio activity, right? And in so many words, whereas heat dilates, opens up the vessels, so blood moves a lot faster. So I can see where like getting the nerves involved, and I'm just a massage therapist. Like I'm not like a biochemist or like someone who does this for a living. It's my hobby to learn about the body. Um, so I can see where like information is sent from the areas that are cold um, to the brain. So that's talking more like nerves, the nervous system sending signals to the brain that like, okay, this area is tired. Can we do something else? Can we employ something else to get it working? And I can see how like the cold has some sort of message sent to the brain where like, oh, well, it's not overacting, right? Because activity increases heat in the area. So the cool can, I don't know, this is really breaking it down to kind of like generic talk. But I can I can see how the cooling of the hands and the feet can confuse the brain on fatigue. And that is different though from inflammation. So what needs to be done? Okay, here we go. So in muscle activity, when we use our muscles, especially in hard efforts, our muscles contract and then expand. And in this contraction and expansion, there is the word that everybody loves to use, sloughing of muscle cells. So, like, your skin's dry, you do this, and a bunch of skin cells just kind of fly off. Um, in that removal of the skin cells or the muscle cells, the body sends the inflammatory response. So the interstitial fluid, which is something I learned in the lymphatic certification that I took, it comes and basically cleans up the area, removes what is not used anymore, and provides new nourishment for the muscles. So when the vessels are dilated, expanded, there is more of this inflammatory response because it's helping to repair the muscle while in action.
Mm.
So that's where like swelling and heat comes into play. If you walk up to someone and touch them after they've put on a hard effort, that's where the swelling and the heat comes from. If you add ice to it, it constricts the blood vessels and slows down that inflammatory response, which is the team coming in to clean up and also replenish what is necessary for these muscles uh, to continue to be powered up. To be, I'm struggling here. So, in a way, that may be effective for short efforts. So, and this is just me and my like what I understand about the body and the hobby that my passionate hobby that I've made it. So that could work for like crit, those who race 30 minutes, going 30 miles an hour for 30 minutes. It could work for those guys. However, the woman that I supported doing 500 miles, I wouldn't want to implement that until the last like 30 miles, she's like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. Then add ice, mostly for the shock value of like, okay, I'm awake, kind of thing. So it's, it depends on, where and when and why you would want to utilize that. with all that said, though, I love Andrew Huberman, and he provides all of the information and all of the perspectives and keeps a totally like unbiased stance. And that's why I love him, because I don't know anything about him. He's so mysterious and
That's
intelligent.
it's true. We get little like sneak
Does a lot of
peeks.
reading.
Like sometimes he'll divulge a tiny bit of personal
Yeah.
information, but usually you're right now. So that inflammation response that you just described, is that the same thing that is coming into play when we stop too long at a rest stop and then we hop back on our bikes and we're like, ah,
Oh
my
my gosh.
legs are
It's the
burning?
worst.
And is that lactic acid? Is that a misnomer, or are people using that word correctly to describe that phenomenon?
Well, I don't like the word lactic acid, just because people have heard it a lot and they use it a lot. And some people use it incorrectly. And then, so I just tried to avoid using it, because lactic acid is one part of a mixture of a lot of things, after like post exercise, or you don't even have to exercise. And anyway, so for the break that we took, because my tires, oh, I'm pointing at them right
Oh
now.
my gosh.
So, that was, so there is a certain like amount of time that you can take a rest period and then get back on the bike and you still have that same amount of energy. What facilitates that is nourishment. You, while doing any efforts, you certainly want to be hydrated and you want to be nourished. Um, I have found in my decades of cycling, if I gorge the whole day before, if I make sure that I'm hydrated the week leading up to a 100-mile bike trip, it's that eliminate, that's not better, but it eliminates nourishment and dehydration issues. Um, in that time, resting time, it depends on how you get back on the bike. I am a long twitch muscle kind of person. So if I start a ride, I need about 20 minutes before I'm like, I feel powerful, So that's why I like crit racing isn't for me, because at 20 minutes, I only have 10 minutes left of the race. Um, Other people can hop on the race and go full force immediately. Um, all power to them. Those are the ones that can race the crit racing. Um, Sometimes, so I know you're asking this because there was someone who didn't enjoy that break or enjoy the stretch after that break. Um, it depends on what you're trained to. If you don't do a lot of riding, stopping, then it's hard to get used to that rhythm, to enjoy it. So, like the social cycling Austin and social cycling around Austin, there's a lot of like biking, climbing hills, sometimes going really fast, and then we stop for an hour. And some people will drink or eat food and lay down, or some people will ride and come back. It just depends on what your training looks like. If you're like, oh, I've got to ride 100 miles this weekend. Okay, I'm going to ride 100 miles. Never stop. That break is going to be challenging for you.
Mhm.
For sure. Um, One thing you mentioned a few minutes ago was that you were crewing for someone who did a super long ride. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yes. Yeah. Christy Tracy, national titles in many disciplines of cycling. She's amazing, unstoppable. She raced 508 miles, Silver State 508, from Reno to Eureka and back again. So it was an out and back. Um, this was her first race after breaking her leg, left leg, in January of this year. So 8 months later. I do not recommend trying that at home. She is certainly a professional and is superhuman, and this has worked for her. She finished to many people's amazement. And I am so honored to have had a front row seat to see her on this journey. She's I've seen her around. She's from Austin, and she's done a lot of racing. I have done a lot of supporting crewing, as I like to call it, for people who do long distance racing. The longest race I have crewed for is 3,000 miles, from Oceanside to Annapolis, Maryland, Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland. Um, when I do this crewing, there's a couple different jobs, but I am usually hired on as a massage therapist. So at different times, during the race or before or after, or um, even way before the race starts, working on them somewhere else. Typically, I have found my best task in that race time crewing is I am best about nutrition and making sure that bottles are ready for them, making sure that they have a snack, and kind of keeping track of when they eat and when they need to eat next. Because at about 450 miles, and I don't know how many hours that was, like at 30 hours, nonstop. The racer just knows to pedal, and they're like, "What?" So I can't even ask her, like, "Hey, do you want black cherry or do you want raspberry?" Like, she's like, "Yeah," and like, that's kind of what you want, because you want that racer just focusing on the race, and I just have to make sure that there's some sort of sustenance on their bike for them, for the race. So there are other positions like driving. That is all in one task. You have to make sure that you can operate this vehicle safely, and navigation has to be able to read the navigation book and tell you which is the next turn. We do use some technology now, but getting into the driver, this race, 508 miles, she completed in 36 hours. And as some may know, the Tour de France, right? That's a big race. It's 28 stages. So it starts in the morning and ends in the evening, and everybody gets a hotel room and they get a shower and they get a full meal. This race is a one stage race. So there's one start and one finish. And you can stop whenever you want, but you stopping means that someone else might pull ahead of you. So she did stop a couple times. With female parts, it is a little harder to relieve yourself. I have seen some male cyclists be able to take advantage of what they've been given to not take time off of the bike. um, that's always been interesting to me. Like, how are these women getting, doing these long distance rides, but also have to, anyway. Um, but yeah, so she did stop. Her longest stop was about, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe. We heated up some water for her. It was fairly cold. It was about 40, 50 degrees at one point through the evening. And that 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. block is pretty tough in any race. It's hard on the crew and the racer. Some people start hallucinating. Some, like, I know I've started, like, we just need to talk about anything. Tell me anything. What'd you do yesterday? What did you do when you were a kid? What's your favorite color? Like, it gets weird.
Do they have like a race radio? Can you talk to the racer when they're on the bike?
That I've crewed for, they would have some sort of radio, or like an earbud from their phone, like, "Hey Siri, call the car," or something. A lot of the times, like with this Silver State 508, there were so many spots that did not have signal. Or, during the day, we do a leapfrog. So sometimes we can get a little distance between our racer and we won't be able to communicate with them. It's not that big of a deal. We'll see them with it, as long as we stay on the route and, within 5-10 miles, then it's we'll be able to communicate. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's one thing I was wondering. Is like, do you keep them in sight all the time? It sounds like you don't.
Uh, the way the road goes, like sometimes the road curves. There was a really cool spot on the Silver State 508 where if we had sat this one spot, we could watch her. She'd disappear behind this, bend. Then she'd come back out around, but then she'd disappear and then come back out. And then, like, the whole thing was a climb. It was really cool to watch, but we're like, we should probably be actually closer in case there is any, because we still couldn't communicate with her. We could watch her.
Yeah.
If we
Oh
climbed.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So is crewing like a jobby job? How are these crews assembled? Do you have a LinkedIn for crewing?
I do have it on my LinkedIn profile that I am a crew extraordinaire with 6 years experience. I don't know if I've listed the racers that I've raced for, but in the world of ultra cycling, which is this basically 24-hour races or more, 200 miles or more, it's a small family. We everybody kind of knows everybody, and if anybody wants to break into it, everybody's excited about it. Like, yeah, new racer, come on, enjoy it. We're gonna make this fun for you because everything else about this is suffering. um, so the way I broke into it, I actually the driveway. I was crewing, or I was doing massage at the driveway, and I'm like, man, I really enjoy doing events. I love being out amongst the people. And Andrew Willis, the owner of the driveway, asked me if I wanted to. He's like, hey, we're doing this pace bend 6:12:24. Come on out. It's a lap race. So however many laps you get in 6 hours, 12 hours, or 24 hours, that's your final count, and whoever gets the most wins. He invited me to come out and do massage, and I've never heard of this. I'm like, what? You guys are crazy. Riding this loop for 24 hours straight? Sure, I'll check it out. I'm like, I don't, how do you set up for that? An event that's 24 hours. So I just went out and set up my table. It was raining. It was cold. It was terrible. I didn't work on anybody, but I actually had such a great time because with the lap race, you have what they call pits. Um, if you've ever been to Pace Bend, it's this 3.1 mile loop or 6.2, I can never remember. And where they have like headquarters, you can set up your pit. So if someone is racing 24 hours, they can always stop at their pit for food, water, whatever. Um, and just meeting all of the crew for the other racers was so fun. And we were just kind of trapped there. We're like, okay, well, what's up? We're going to be standing next to each other for 24 hours, so might as well like just talk, right?
You were just like stuck in this cold, wet, like almost carny village of pit crew people, and they were like, "Join our circus," and you're like, "Okay."
They're like, so how's this work over here? Like the people at the driveway. But as it went on, I met Andrew Willis was racing it, I believe, and his wife was there making sure he had the bottles and the food and whatnot. And I was chatting with her, and I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who anybody was or like what the status was of anybody. And like, wow, this is like really fun. Like I'm having fun. And I stayed up the whole I brought a tent in case I wanted to sleep. I didn't sleep. Like later, she's like, oh, would you want to do this again? And I'm like thinking a year from now, do the same event. I'm like, yeah, sure, it'll be fun. So then later I had, through a series of emails, realized that that was Holly Ammerman, Andrew Willis's wife, who they were planning on doing some big rides. And Andrew Willis has gone on to he's attempted Raw. I'm not sure he's actually completed it yet, which is a 300-mile race, um, roughly 400 miles. Um, wait, I thought, no, it's 900. Sorry. It's a third of Race Across America.
Oh, wow.
But I have only supported him for the biggest race was NCOM in Del Rio, about 1,000-mile race. So that took about 3 days to complete. That was pretty challenging. So, anyway, so for someone to break into this, you have to know someone who's doing the race, or a lot of these racers are looking for crew people. And I'm actually thinking of making some sort of workshop on how to be a good crew person, because there's so much to it. You know, a lot of racers are like, oh, my wife and my kids can be my crew. And
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the wife and the kids, a little Geppetto. He could be a crew racer.
Oh my gosh.
yeah, but, you know, you find out
Yeah.
with the first race, you're like, oh, they're
Put the phone
not good.
down and help your parent.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I, the majority of jobs that I get as a crew person is just they've seen me on a race, they've seen me crew for someone else, or they have talked to other racers and they're like, hey, who would you recommend, or who would you suggest? And my name pops up in a lot of conversation. And I think that, you know, among all sorts of things, I think the fact that I have a flexible job really helps in being able to do this sort of job. A lot of people only are able to take 10 days, you know, two weeks or whatever off each year. And they're like, I'm not going to not sleep for
Yeah.
4 days, you know, on my limited vacation days. So I think that's why I am able to do these jobs a lot, is because like people ask me and I'm like, yeah, I also enjoy it. So, you know, that doesn't hurt. But
Sweet.
More famous in the cycling world, you or Kat? Like, you have a clear reason for everybody to know you, because we see you at all these races. Like, if no one knows any other masseuse in all of Austin, they know you.
Carrie. Yeah.
And then Kat, people just know inexplicably.
It's the pink hair. That's all it is.
But you didn't have pink hair until recently. Kat's just Kat.
It was just me. Yeah. Sorry.
it's the liking to go out, and you know, Kat and I love to talk to people.
Yes.
And
That's true.
I have noticed that Kat loves to ask questions.
I
and
do.
Of a lot of the personality books that I've read, that's one of the things. If you want to be liked, don't ever talk about yourself. Always ask other people about themselves.
You've been involved in writing Ragbri numerous times. Can you tell us about that? Maybe give us the thumbnail.
A little short. So this year was my 12th year. Ragbri is an annual bicycle ride across the state of Iowa, always from the west end to the east end. It's a different route every year. It's a ride. It's not a race. Each day has a certain amount of miles. You start in one town, you end in another. There's always a mid-town of every day. And it's just a party. You can see, or it's a training week. You know, get out of it what you want. You'll see all sorts of cyclists out there, from like crit racing, training dudes and chicks, to like parents with their kids on family vacation, just riding, you know, half a day. So it's a good time. It's for anybody, for everybody. Even if you don't ride a bike, people are always looking for a driver or some sort of support. So yeah, it's a good time.
Nice.
It reminds me, I've never been, but in my imagination, it's the Thursday night social ride that goes on for days. Are you sleeping outside all along the way, or how does that work?
I am. I take a tent and camping gear. My Lux camping gear, because it's 7 nights. Typically, if you are speedy enough, once the route is announced, usually the last weekend of July or of January, Um, I've heard sometimes that people will go and just book rooms across the state before the route is announced. And then once the route is announced, cancel at any of the towns that are not nearby. Um, these towns, though, vary from population 27 to population, like Des Moines is 200,000. So a lot of the towns don't have a lot of hotels, motels for you to stay at. Sometimes people use warm showers or couch surfing or something to connect with locals. We have had years where our bus driver would get into town before us riders would, and they'd just be walking around and they'd meet, just meet people walking around or at a stand or whatever. They're like, oh, well, you can come and set your tents up in our yard and use our bathroom or whatever. And like, what? So we hadn't known them for any more than 2 hours. And, the people of Iowa are good people. I might be biased, but they're always excited to have some sort of story to share with RAGBRAI and about RAGBRAI. So it's a good time.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Do you have any other questions for Carrie?
That was fantastic.
That was really great.
Like one day, if you ever want to come on and just talk about crewing, we could just make an episode of that.
A 24-hour podcast about crewing
Yes.
for 24 hours. Like minute by minute.
Take you guys live with one of the crew.
Yes. Right. All right. Well,
where are you? Are you asleep? I hate you.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Carrie. Like I said, you're a great friend, and I'm so happy that I got to meet you through Team Snacks and all the rides that we've been doing together, and look forward to many more. So Thank you for coming.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya. So that was Carrie Eckerman. She is Healing Neptune on Instagram. If you have any questions from anything that she brought up during the episode, hit her up there. She's wide open to answering questions, and she lives here in town. So if you have anything for her, just let her know.
I'd suggest writing a letter with pen and mailing it, snail mail. I don't know. Mail it to Dear Diary, Coffee, 1212 Chacon, Unit 103, Austin, Texas 78702. And I'll be sure that she gets your letter eventually. But you have to decorate the envelope with little
We
doodles.
can be pen pals.
Carrie will become your pen pal.
Yes.
But
she'll have to mail it to Dear Diary, and then you'll mail it to the person who sent it.
There's no limit to the number of DMs that Carrie will answer or emails that she'll handwrite long-form letters in response to.
I'm not sure she signed up for this.
I don't know if she signed up for any of it. Okay.
Anyways, we're recording this on Wednesday, the 28th, and tomorrow I'm heading to Fayetteville, Arkansas for the Grit Mountain Bike Festival. So I'm going to do recording there as much as I can, and I'm going to be staying a few days after. So hopefully have lots of cool experiences and adventures there.
Yeah.
What are you going to be up to?
Handling all of these letters that are going to be flooding in. Hopefully
true.
one of them is your postcard from Arkansas.
Do they have mail there?
I don't know.